Welcome to Red All Over YouTube, Episode 3. This is the YouTube version of the Liverpool fanzine, Red All Over the Land, for over 25 years. It's the longest serving and the only remaining Liverpool fanzine. And I'm with the editor, I'm Graham Mack. I'm with the editor, John Pearman. How are you, John?
I'm fine, Graham. How are you?
Very good. You're in a new office. You've moved house recently, so the nerve centre of Red All Over the Land, or the Gets On Your Nerve centre of Red All Over the Land, has moved to a new location on the Wirral, isn't it?
No, not on the Wirral. It's in Blacon, near Chester, very close to Chester.
Okay.
And at the moment, we're surrounded by packing cases and things that we can't get in the loft. We're a loft ladder short of a proper house.
I see. All right. But you're working on that, though?
We're working on it. Yeah, it's ordered.
All right.
August the 5th.
So how has this affected the publication of Red All Over the Land? And did you decide to use the close season to do this because it was going to be less pressure?
No, nothing stops Red All Over the Land. Not even the pandemic. So moving house wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
People send things in pretty sharpish. So, and all I do basically is take them off the email. Take it from there.
All right. Well, we've got. Sorry, John. What was that?
And we've got the new issue coming out next week. It's with the printer, so it's too late to change anything now. It's with the printer, and they all should be in the post by, if not the end of this week, then probably Monday. No problem at all.
All right. Well, just before we get to the fanzine, I should let you know that on this broadcast, this Red All Over YouTube, we've got a couple of A-list guests, actually. We've got Chris Lawler, who is the nephew of the famous Liverpool player Chris Lawler. He's coming on to talk about some people who did something very special, climbing Ben Nevis to raise money for a really important charity. And as well as that, we have the legendary commentator, Alan Greene. Yes, that Alan Greene will be here, and you'll be able to ask him questions. If you haven't already sent them in to John, you'll be able to ask him questions in the comments section, and you can even start putting your questions up now for Alan Greene. He's coming up in this broadcast. So what's happening with the fanzine, John? What can we look forward to in the next issue?
Well, first of all, we can look forward to selling it outside Anfield.
Yeah.
Which has not been possible for a long time. It seems it's so long ago. It must be, well, it's March of last year at the game against Atletico Madrid. So we really are looking forward to that. And to be honest, we've spoken to the club. They've been brilliant. They've said to you, go along, do it as normal. If there's any problems, we'll communicate it with you. But we don't see any real reason for not selling in the normal slots outside the ground. That's Flagpole Corner, behind the Albert near the club shop. And then I'll be very close to the Billy Little statue box that's there. And, and I'm looking forward to being back there. And really, really can't wait for that. In the new issue, there was a tournament played recently. They called it the Euros.
I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about it. And so we've covered that. And I don't like to say that I've actually started drinking Peroni. I don't know why. But the Euros get covered. And also we've got a couple of articles in it by fans who have travelled across the continent watching Liverpool. One goes back to 2001 when Liverpool were in Rome, beat Roma in their own stadium 2-0. Michael Owen scored the goals and we all sang Hallelujah. And then, of course, we've got our European correspondent who has actually been to, I think he said, 11 finals. And he's seen Liverpool in 8 finals. So that's pretty good. So, yeah, we've got all that. We've also covered what we call the Wall of Shame. But we won't tell you too much about that until we get round to it. But the Wall of Shame was we wanted people to nominate or vote for their worst pundit, worst match commentator, the worst fake atmosphere, something that I don't know who invented it. Somebody, maybe you've been on Middlesbrough, Graham. Their fake atmosphere, didn't they? They could have, or it could have been. It could have been down at Arsenal, with the library.
Yeah.
But we've got that, and of course we've got a subject close to a lot of people's minds at the moment: VAR, the worst decisions made last season. Now I opened it up and said you didn't have to put a Liverpool game in it, but they did, and we had a great response.
I wonder which one will be the winner, John.
Well, you will have to sit there and find out, Mr. Mack.
Okay. Well, we will be revealing the results on this broadcast, but the full results will be printed in the latest issue of Read All Over the Land.
We've also got a prize for the person who sent in an entry. We drew his name out, and we've got a really special prize. It's something that any Liverpool fan would love to have.
And will we be announcing that on this broadcast, or will you
announce that on this program?
Okay,
tonight.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, and for subscribers to Read All Over the Land, when can we expect to get it through the door?
If Mr. Postman's on his game, if we post them by Friday, you'll get it by Tuesday. Should be by Tuesday.
Other than that, they'll be available at the match when the season starts.
And the two friendlies, when we play the two friendlies on the Sunday, the 8th or 9th, whatever, 9th is it, and the Monday evening, they're going to be on sale there. And then, of course, when we play the first two home games against Burnley and Chelsea, they'll be on sale then. And if we can get to an away game, at Norwich, we'll be selling them there as well.
Great.
That's down to ticket allocation.
Okay, John, can you just tilt your camera down a little bit because we're missing your chin, and it is quite a famous. There we go. Now look. That's looking good. Okay. So as well as that, we got a live event coming up in November that we spoke about last time. Have we got more details about what's happening at the Florrie?
Well, it's going ahead. It's Saturday, November the 13th. Possible time will be 7:30. We're hoping to have a Liverpool legend there. We've got music being provided, and also Home Baked are going to be providing a special pie for the night and food. Both versions, there'll be vegan and vegetarian, and of course the other one. We'll also having Mike Lepic there from the JC23 Foundation, and Mike will be holding, we'll be doing a raffle. Mike is very good at these things, and also an auction. And some of the things that Mike brings along, they really are collectible items, and they're all Liverpool related.
And this is raising money for the food bank?
This will be raising money for the Florrie.
Oh, for the Florrie, I see.
For the Florrie.
So how's the food bank charity going? Because Read All Over the Land's been involved with that, and I thought the Florrie was involved with that too.
It's all links in. It will all link in. Yeah, it'll all link in, and we just hope that everybody, if you can say it, everybody's a winner at the end of it. And it was going to be our 25th anniversary show. Unfortunately, we had to cancel that. I can't think what it was again, but that had to be cancelled. So this is the belated 25th show on the closest date to our 26th anniversary.
Brilliant.
And that's what we're doing.
All right. Cheers, John.
And if you can see the cover of the next issue.
Oh, here it is, exclusive.
Here it is. This is the cover, yeah. And a slight mention to Jordan Pickford, because Virgil van Dijk is back in training. It's a bit like telling George Foreman that Ali was getting in training. So we'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Cheers, John. Hi to Ian Golder, who's just sent a simple message. He says, evening, lads. So evening, Ian. You can put your comments up anytime you like if you're watching this live on YouTube. And, of course, you'll be able to ask questions to our very special guest star, who is Alan Greene. And we should bring him in now. So let's bring him in. Alan Greene, who was one of BBC Radio 5 Live's most senior football commentators and was the winner of the Sony Radio Academy Award for Sports Broadcaster of the Year. He's known for his forthright style of football commentary and has been involved in controversies, including disputes with managers, including Alex Ferguson and Sam Allardyce. Alan Greene, thank you so much for being on Read All Over YouTube with us.
It's an absolute pleasure, Graham.
I've got to say that when I first knew you were the greatest commentator was when I was listening to an England game, and I forget the game, but I think it might have been a World Cup game. And you said, David Beckham is a waste of space. And I'd never heard honesty like that particularly from a BBC commentator. And that was the thing about you. You were so honest. Did you find that you got a lot of flack from the powers that be there for that kind of honesty?
No, not at that stage, Graham. I thought there was only one way for me to be a commentator, and that's for me to express what I felt to be the truth. That didn't mean that I got it right. It's just the way it was to my eyes. And remember, and people who are looking at my image on screen at the moment can well understand why I spent the overwhelming majority of my career on radio. But on radio, I was there to be the eyes of the person who couldn't see the game. Therefore, I just tried to be as honest as I could. If I thought a tackle was bad, I hammered the tackler. If I thought there was nothing wrong with the tackle, I hammered the referee. And if I thought that David Beckham didn't have much of a brain, well, he was an excellent player in many ways, but not elevated to the stature that he had at the end.
Yeah. Was he overrated in the end then?
David, yes, I think he was. I mean, an extremely nice guy and a very, very good player. But he also sold himself well. And that's why I think he reached the elevated stages of what for him was a great career. He's now pursuing it in an odd way in Miami with a team in the MLS, the league there. And I actually pay attention to that because about 3 years ago, out of the blue, a team there called Atlanta United asked me to come and be their commentator. And I went out for, I think it was 7 months. And I was their television commentator. So I got heavily involved in MLS and follow it still. But it wasn't really practical for me to carry on doing that. They weren't paying me enough.
Right. Well, you and David Beckham actually have something in common because you both fell out with Fergie.
I never took her out. That's a lie. Vicky and I never went on a date. She asked me a number of times.
So what was the issue with Alex Ferguson that you had? How did that all start? Because he actually fell out with the BBC over it, didn't he? And refused interviews.
Alex was always a prat. I mean, I got to know him first when he was manager at Aberdeen. And in the early 80s, I went up to Aberdeen for what was then BBC Radio Sport, Radio 2 as it was then, to commentate on Aberdeen's games in the European Cup Winners' Cup. And I met Alex and Archie Knox, who was his number two. And after games, he would invite me on to a late night session at a hotel where we got to know each other a little bit. But I think he discovered pretty early on that I was rather forthright. And when he moved to Manchester, I think he assumed that I was going to be a friend of his, that I was going to do his bidding. And that was never going to be the case. And I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But I went to the Cliff for a manager's press conference the day before the game. United were top of the table. They were playing Southampton the following day, and I was going to commentate. And I was there with Jimmy Armfield, who was a very dear, great friend of mine. And Jimmy was working for the Daily Express at the time. And Jimmy was there to do an interview with Mark Hughes that had been prearranged. And Alex was giving the team news. And he said, Sparky's not playing, he's not fit. And Jimmy nudged me And he said, but Steve Bruce, he will play. He will play. So the long and the short of it was, we accepted that as the truth. And we waited for Mark Hughes afterwards. And Mark came down the steps at the cliff as it was then. And Jimmy said, oh, well, obviously we'll have to delay the interview. And Mark said, why? Why? And Jimmy said, well, you're not playing tomorrow. He said, I'm playing. He said, well, Alex has just told us you're not playing. So the long and the short of it was, Jimmy decided it would be diplomatic not to do the interview. But on the Saturday at Old Trafford, as I was giving out the team news, I said I'd learned a very important lesson the previous day, never to listen to the propaganda that came out of the mouth of the Manchester United manager prior to an important game. I said, I will trust myself to recognise the United players when they come out onto the pitch and not listen to Alex Ferguson, what he got to know about it. And that was the start of a downward trend. The last words we spoke, the only words we spoke between 1992 and the present day was the night in Turin of 1999 when United got past Juventus to reach the European Cup final. And I was walking away from the ground and I saw him and I thought, well, I'm not going to walk past him and be so ignorant as to not congratulate him. So I congratulated him. And he looked at me as if I was a piece of dirt. And maybe I was. But that was the only words that we spoken between 1992 and 2021. End of story. Great relationship.
And what about Sam Allardyce? What went wrong there?
Oh, hey, twat number 2. I mean, Allardyce. I did a game of Bolton, and the commentary position at Bolton was quite high up in the main stand. And I said during the commentary, it's always odd when I'm doing a game here that I get a creak in my neck trying to follow the path of the ball. It's so high above where I'm sitting, and I'm high up in the stand. How do these Bolton fans put up with this? Well, I won't tell you what I called it, but he got to hear about it, and he made a big fuss. But, you know, he said, no, if he can't accept honest criticism, that's the way Bolton played. He made them a success for what that was, but it wasn't football that I wanted to see.
Yeah, it was just those long high balls, and that was the way you decided
well,
to point it out. Yeah.
I may not have done much for my career, but I can tell you, I could live with myself because I knew I was telling the truth as I saw it.
You did have an amazing career with the BBC. How many years were you there?
In total, 45.
Wow.
I joined the BBC almost straight after I left university, having done appropriate subjects, modern history and Russian studies. and I joined them as a BBC news trainee in London. And many people will have heard of Jeremy Paxman. Jeremy Paxman was a news trainee a couple of years before me. The BBC took on a dozen graduates every year to train as broadcast journalists. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted not to be a broadcaster, actually. I wanted to be an editor. What is now the 10 o'clock news used to be the 9 o'clock news on BBC One. And that was my great ambition in life, to be editor of the 9 o'clock news. I didn't want to be on screen. I didn't want to be at a microphone. I wanted to run the show. And then, what did I know? I mean, the BBC decided otherwise.
Well, how did you become a football
commentator?
How did you become a commentator then, Alan?
Oh, it's a nonsense. I mean, absolute nonsense. I went back to Belfast, where I'd never worked, to work in the local news programme. And then I was diverted into the sports department in BBC Northern Ireland. And the commentator, the football commentator then left to join RTE in Dublin. And I was asked to do a game. And I said, look, I'm not a commentator. And the female boss said, well, I need you to do it. So I did it. I thought it was pretty awful. But, you know, they didn't have anybody else. So I did a few games. But not long after that, I decided it was time for me to move back to England. I thought, I'm never going to get this editorial path sitting in Belfast doing football commentary. So I applied for and got this job in Manchester, and it was what I thought was to be a production job, not on air, a production job, looking after affairs in the north of England for BBC Radio Sport. And I will never forget, just before I left Belfast, she said, "Well, you've got your first commentary." I said, what are you talking about? She said, "Well, you're down for a commentary." I said, "Well, that's ridiculous. I'm not joining them as a commentator." They said, "Well, you're doing England against Northern Ireland on the 28th of February, 1982. I said, "That's absurd." She said, "Well, you're down for it." I did the game with Peter Jones. I was so relieved that I could recognise some of the players. Brian Robson scored an early goal, and I was lucky enough to describe it. But I thought afterwards, I remember sitting in a hotel in London thinking, well, at least I've done that, and they'll never ask me again. They did.
And when you came to England in '82, you weren't a Liverpool fan. In fact, you didn't have an English team. How did you end up becoming a Liverpool fan?
Well, I didn't have any affiliation to any club in England, none whatsoever. But I mean, that was a great era for Liverpool, and I couldn't help but admire them. And I did admire them. It didn't blind me to the successes of other teams. It didn't blind me to the success of Fergie when he went to Old Trafford. You know, I understood. But I had misfortune is probably the only word I can think of now. I was commentating at Hillsborough. And I started the game. I was doing it with Peter Jones. And I could tell very quickly that things weren't right. I kept looking to my left, even though I remember Beardsley hitting the post at the other end. But I was aware of, you know, too big a crowd at the end to the left. And then the policeman came on, got to the referee, and the game stopped. And of course, that was a tragic event in the history of Liverpool Football Club. And it was such an important event in my life, not just in my working life, but in my emotional life, because I became bound up with Liverpool, with the way the club reacted, with the way the fans behaved, by the maltreatment of the scum Sun, of which I've never bought a copy since. And I just grew emotionally bound up with the club. It grew, my love affair. I knew Peter Robinson very well when he was chief executive officer at Anfield, and I would, on the rare days that I'd have a day off, and I could go to Anfield, I asked him if I could buy tickets, and he would help me get there. He never let me pay for the damn things. That was the trouble. You know, I wanted to acknowledge that I was privately a supporter, but you know, I became a season ticket holder. Have no regrets whatsoever. I was very important, though, I've got to say, Graham, and to John, very important in my working life. If anything, I was harder on Liverpool than I was on other clubs. I was so determined not to allow my personal feelings to take over my commentary and be biased towards Liverpool. I could name one or two others, and not with a Liverpool affiliation, who showed completely different reactions. But I don't want to ruin the programme.
Would one of those people's names be Martin?
Yeah, could be. Could be. I remember John Motson. He's not working anymore. John had a clear affiliation to Tottenham, and it's difficult because anybody working in a football environment will have a favourite club. Alan Parry's always been a Liverpool fan and didn't make any effort really to hide it. But I just felt it was important for the listeners to be able to trust me and not to think that I was giving them a biased commentary.
Getting back to Hillsborough, when did you first get the feeling that there was a cover-up?
Very quickly. I became a news reporter again that afternoon. I remember leaving Peter Jones up in the commentary position because Jonesy was there to describe the pictures he was seeing. And I left Peter and I said, look, I'm going to try to find out what's going on here. And there was so much wrong downstairs. I was outside the dressing rooms. Kenny was there looking devastated. Clough was having a few drinks. And it felt so wrong. And then I was interviewed not long after Hillsborough by the West Midlands Police.
Because they were the West Midlands Police were involved, weren't they, investigating this South Yorkshire?
South Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Cop. So I was interviewed by the West Midlands Police, and I just told them the truth as I knew it. And I subsequently found out many years later that I'd been sort of marked A+ on the interview. I was actually shown physically the interview as a document by another inquiry. And I said, well, why didn't they follow it up? It was part of the cover-up. We know to this day, don't we? You know, there's still no justice about Hillsborough. Most people know the truth, but it's not official enough in my view. And I'm still upset physically when the anniversary comes around each year. And I didn't lose anybody. I didn't know anybody who died or was hurt. But that's how much I was bound up with Liverpool and other Liverpool supporters ever since that awful day.
2003, you wrote an article in the Belfast Telegraph, and you were disputing the notion that the Premier League was the greatest in the world. Do you still believe that?
I think the Premier League is an exceptional league, but you're not talking about nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so much of it was about hype. So much of it was about selling this league. The Premier League Authority selling it. The clubs were selling it commercially. And yet I was going to watch games, and many of them were just crap. And you know, I couldn't ignore that. And it's not my job to say this is a brilliant league if it's not. Now, I happen to think it's an exceptional league now. But, you know, I see, when I was working, I'd see other clubs who I considered exceptional. Barcelona over the years, Bayern Munich over the years. And I have no doubt whatsoever that if they were playing in the English Premier League, most likely they'd win it each year. Unless there was a Liverpool resurgent or a Manchester City who bought their way to success, or Manchester United as was. Yes, the Premier League authorities did not like me writing that, and they let me know about it. And I found out years later when I was trying to get some additional work, and the Premier League basically didn't want to know about me. They considered me to be an enemy, which is nonsense. I wasn't an enemy, but I was telling the truth in a way that they didn't like. I wasn't selling the product.
Yeah, and it became a product, didn't it? Which is a shame, but this is the way it is, and we have to live with the way it is. Yeah. So you're a staunch Liverpool fan now. You write great articles in Read All Over the Land, but you're on at least one Manchester United's ringtone.
True. Oh, I'll never forget that. It was, I mentioned Turin and Fergie and congratulating him on getting past Juventus in the semi-final in 1999. Well, it started as I was commentating on the final. And unfortunately, well, people would say it's a matter of good fortune if you're describing critical goals. But it really sickened me that I described Solskjaer and Sheringham's goals that won the European Cup for Manchester United. Anyway, at the start of the following season, I did a game at Old Trafford very early on in the season. And I was walking from the car park to where I entered the ground to get up to the commentary position. And this guy, young guy, stopped me. He said, "You're Alan Greene." I thought, oh God, what's this? Because I was not exactly popular amongst Manchester United supporters. "You're Alan Greene." I said, yes. And I'm thinking, are there police in the vicinity? He said, "You better hear this." and he played me the ringtone on his telephone. And it was the commentary I did on Solskjaer and Sheringham's goals. So it was nice of him, but I tell you what, it made me feel even sicker that day.
All right, let's bring it up to the present day. What are your views on the Euros?
I watched very little of it.
Really?
Very, very little of it. I didn't see the final. Except I saw the last 10 minutes of extra time. And the reason is that it's 5 years ago when I did the European Championship in France in 2016. I announced, probably rashly, on air to Nicky Campbell during the breakfast show on 5 Live that I wouldn't be going to Russia. And he said, "What?" I said, "I'm not going to Russia for the World Cup." He said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Have you seen the hooligans here in Marseille and the English hooligans having an organised fight? I don't want to have anything to do with that. The last way I'd want to spend 6 weeks in the summer of 2020, 2018, as it would have been then, was being involved in the World Cup." So that's how I told my employers, which obviously didn't go down too well. But I had the honest intention of leaving international football in 2016. So even though I'd loved working with England and had many great times with England, I felt it was right, if I wasn't going to go to Russia, that I'd take a step backwards and allow colleagues the opportunity. And that's what I did. So, come the Euros postponed for a year, I've basically lost interest. I don't get the hysteria that surrounds a tournament now. I think, when they go, "It's coming home," it drove me mad. I wanted England to do well. I wanted England to win, but it was hysterical, and I didn't want to take part in it. So I switched off.
Yeah, I watched it through, and I watched it through to the final, and I realised sitting there during the final, I wasn't really that bothered whether England won it or not. I can't say I was supporting either England or Italy. I just wanted to watch a good match of football, but I didn't particularly. It's just not like watching Liverpool, And people ask me why I'm not fussed about England now and again, and I go, because I don't have to be. I'm a Liverpool fan. I don't need to.
Yeah.
I don't need to
That's
watch
right.
another team to watch somebody in big tournaments against top players.
Well, it might seem bizarre for me to say it, having, worked so closely with England from 1990 to 2016. That's over a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
But when I stopped, I did lose interest. I just sort of backed away, and I allowed, if anything, my love affair with Liverpool to gain further strength. All I wanted was Liverpool to win.
Yeah.
And if Henderson had been playing, for example,
Yeah.
other than his sort of semi-injured state, or Trent Alexander-Arnold had been the right fullback, I would have shown more interest. But instead, I'm looking at Harry Maguire and I'm thinking, what?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Jordan Pickford and I think, I don't mind if you don't save this penalty, mate.
Yeah.
I don't want him to become a hero, because he will never be a hero for me.
Yeah, I think with England, you look at the banners around the ground, the Hull banners and the Brighton banners and the Hartlepool banners, and you realise, well, you're just supporting this because your teams are Hull and Brighton and Hartlepool.
And that was the way I remember it. Through those 26 years with England, you go on away trips, and you see banners for Rotherham or Grimsby.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, hang on a second, that's because your team doesn't play European football. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry for you.
Yeah.
But if this is the best you can get, all right. But we're more fortunate than that.
What about you, John? I know you going into it, you weren't so keen on it. Did you end up watching any matches?
I watched the semi-final and final, but I've just got no interest in international football now. And I honestly believe that last season, why they had to play another tournament, we'd got players going down with COVID, etc., and we were being told we couldn't go anywhere. Yet players were being flown around the world, to Brazil, to Argentina, to Russia, to Spain, all that, and I just didn't. I felt that the tournament should not have taken place. I also thought the same about the Champions League, the UEFA, the Europa League, and the FA Cup. It was football for football's sake last year, and no one cared about the fans. It was football for television's sake. Sorry, that's how I viewed it.
John, you're absolutely right. Think about it. The key element in pursuing sport at this time of a tragic pandemic, it's money. It's money. Apart from, I mean, I was fortunate. I did 7 World Cup finals. I also did 5 Olympic Games, and I had a great time. But, you know, I can't bring myself to watch the Olympics in Tokyo at the moment because it's perverse that it's happening. COVID rises are horrific in the Japanese capital at the moment. Why are the Olympics happening? And they're happening because of contracts with television, with sponsors all over the world. I find it absurd. So I'm treating the Olympics as I did the Euros. I'm not bothering.
Alan, of
It's sad.
the current commentators that are on TV and radio, who do you like? Who's good? Who should we watch out for? I'm asking for a positive
difficult.
now from Alan Greene.
No, it's a little difficult, isn't it? Because I'm really not listening anymore.
Right.
And if I'm watching televised football, it was the only way we could follow it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I have the sound on mute. I don't listen to the current commentators. That doesn't mean I don't rate the odd one. I mean, I like Guy Mowbray on BBC television. I think Rob Hawthorne's a good lad as well. And I've known Rob for many years. But most of the others, they're just pushing themselves. You know, I don't get this over commentary that we've got, if I can put it that way. They can't shut up, you know, and particularly when they're working with a summariser. You know, they're jumping into each other's silences as if you're not allowed to say nothing. Don't you just want to watch the game? That's my attitude. And my ideal, I heard John say earlier about the automated sound that they used. Some producer came up with the idea, oh, let's have crowd noise. We know there's no crowd, but let's have crowd noise. Well, it's ridiculous. So my perfect scenario watching a televised game from the future will be, I'm given an option on my television set where I can hear the real crowd, but have no commentary at all.
Right. So it's like being at the match.
That's how I'll enjoy it.
Yeah, because there's no commentary at the match. Yeah. Although I do admit that when I go to the match, sometimes I will take a little radio and I'll have the Radio Merseyside commentary on because I know it's going to be biased. You know, I never want neutral commentary. Yeah. So Alan Greene, what are you up to these days then?
Sorry, what am I?
What are you up to these days?
Very little. I mean, I admit I'm finding it quite difficult. The BBC decided that they would not renew my contract. I'm now 69 years of age. So, you know, having spent 45 years in broadcasting, it's not a bad innings. But personally, I wasn't ready to step aside. But there's so many, let's say, biased influences now. And if you're looking, you asked me about commentators and who I admire, something like that. I would, if I was a producer, an editor, I would tick only one box: ability. Does this person have the ability to be a really good commentator? I'm not interested in their gender. I'm not interested in their race. I'm not interested in their youth. But there are the boxes that are increasingly ticked by the people who decide to broadcast it these days. And, you know, I obviously maybe ticked boxes a long while ago, but I wasn't ticking the boxes that they wanted anymore. And that's okay. You know, I accept that. In fact, the criticism I make of the current commentary, I really should land that criticism on the steps of the producer, because they're the people who could influence it. They're the people who can lean on what we call the talkback key. That's the key to talk to the broadcaster's earpiece and say, "Shut up, Gary. Shut up, Martin." That's all they need to do. And if you don't do that, they'll just do whatever they think's right. And unfortunately, most of the time today, it's wrong.
Maybe it should come full circle. Maybe you should be the guy in charge of the broadcast, like you originally wanted to be.
They wouldn't risk it.
They wouldn't.
They wouldn't risk it. It's just no. I'd love to be, because many of the commentators that are around on BBC 5 Live, John Murray, Ian Dennis, Alistair Bruce Ball, Conor McNamara. At one stage, I think it was about 10, 12 years ago, I was asked by a producer to talk to them, to encourage them, and to criticize them. And I said, look, how arrogant would that make me look? If they would like me to talk to them, that's different. I'd be happy to talk to them. And one or two encouraged me, and I did talk to them. But that time is past.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Well, John, you've got plenty of questions for Alan, which we're going to ask a little bit later on. These are ones that have been sent in by readers of Read All Over the Land. You'll also be able to ask Alan questions from the comments. I should just go through the comments, some of the comments we've had so far. So I mentioned Ian Golder, who said, "Evening, lads." Then Leon Lawler, who is this another relative of Chris Lawler's? We'll find out from Chris in just a bit. He says, Alan Greene, top commentator, used to love listening to Radio 5 Live back in the day before the dross of Sky TV. Actually, why did you never go to Sky TV, Alan? Did you ever talk to them?
They wouldn't have wanted me.
No? You wouldn't sell the product?
If they'd asked me, I would have talked to them, of course. But no, I think I was too critical for them.
Okay. Big Ben says...
Critical of the product that they were selling.
Okay. Big Ben says, great to see and hear Alan loud and clear here in Dublin. So hi, Big Ben, who's watching in Dublin. Kerry Lawler just says, love Alan Greene. And Cal Maloney says, hi, Kerry. Not sure what that's about. But anyway, maybe we'll get to the bottom of that a little bit later on. So bring in your comments. Your comments, you can see them. If you're watching on YouTube, you can comment now and you can ask a question for Alan Greene later when we get to that. But John, we're going to bring someone special in. Do you want to just give us some background here to Chris before I bring him in?
Yes, actually, you've mentioned a guy there, Ian Golder. Ian actually got in touch with me and told me that a group of football fans, that weren't just Liverpool fans, were going to go up to Scotland and climb up Ben Nevis, or walk up Ben Nevis, I should say. The reason they're doing this, it was inspired, Chris will explain this, by the Hillsborough events at Hillsborough, and also the effect that Hillsborough had on a lot of people's mental health. And these guys went and did this in June, and they've raised to date £30,000, over £30,000. Now, Chris Lawler is the nephew of the Liverpool legendary fullback who played in the 1965 Cup final, which I went to, as Murray would tell you. And he also scored possibly the greatest winning goal in a Merseyside derby if we take out Divock Origi's classic against Jordan Pickford. And this was in November 1970. Liverpool were 2-0 down early in the second half. It was 0-0 at half time. And Everton had two players wearing white boots, which in them days they stood out. Nobody wore white boots, but Alan Ball did. And I think it was Alan Whittle. And they wore the white boots. And Everton were 2-0 up. And then Liverpool came back. They got level 2-2. And then I think it was 5 minutes from the end, Chris Lawler scores this goal. And I remember speaking to Brian Hall, another Liverpool legend, bless him, and he said, the silent night came in and scored. And I'm sure Chris will explain a little bit about his uncle. And we've had a couple of comments for Chris as well.
All right.
So
Well,
there you go.
just before
Yeah.
we get to that, here is that goal from 1970. 5 minutes to go. It's 2-2. It's Liverpool-Everton.
Is Lindsay. And here's Lawler coming round. Goal!
And the great thing about that, Alan, is after that goal, I'm pretty sure the commentator was Gerald Sinstad. He just said goal and then went silent.
Jerry was one of the best commentators, without question.
Yeah. You didn't need to say anything then, because,
Yeah.
you know, Liverpool have now, it's the win. He's clearly scored the winner. So let's bring him in, the nephew of Chris Lawler, who's also called Chris Lawler. How are you, Chris?
I'm fine, lads. You okay?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Now, I know that the Chris Lawler, the player, he came from a big family. How many did he come from?
Yeah, he was one of 15.
One of 15 kids.
11
So,
lads.
and are all your family, there's a lot of kids?
Yeah, well, so on my dad's side, obviously there's 15 and Catholics. Mum let the sides on a bit, there was 8 of them.
Right.
So I've probably got, I think it's just over 50 first cousins.
So are you called Chris Lawler because they just ran out of names and had to start at the beginning again?
I was born in 62.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris, he was just sort of like making his way. I mean, he captained England schoolboys, 1959. He was 40 and a half in front of 95,000 people at Wembley against West Germany.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Wow.
I mean, he had like the likes of Martin Peters in the team, and the opposition had like Wolfgang Overath. You remember him from like the 1970 quarter final? Put the ball over when Muller scored the winner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but massive families back then.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know half your cousins. I mean, I probably used to know more on my mum's side because my grandma used to live with us. You know what I mean? But yeah. I mean, I'm hearing all the comments, and Leon is actually my Uncle Chris's son.
Okay, right.
Now, he believe it or not, he actually supports Tottenham because he idolised Ray Clements.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Leon was that age, you know what I mean? He's a bit younger, obviously a lot younger than me.
Yeah.
And he just followed Tottenham then after that, which is bizarre. You know what I mean? But,
yeah.
He's a great lad. But I say the derby is then, I mean, talking Alan there, the Radio 5, Radio 2 as it was then. I mean, I think that game, we had the radio on the stairs, because we could just run out the door and you could hear the cop. We go 2 miles away, you know what I mean? And it was great. I mean, I was brought up on the likes of Peter Jones, Brian Butler, Alan Parry, and Dennis Lord, and Jimmy Armfield summarising. And I'd listen to any games, you know, never mind Liverpool games. Remember like the 5 Arsenal Sheffield Wednesday Cup ties, you know, or going to extra time Sheffield Wednesday in the 3rd division, the four Liverpool games against Arsenal. I mean, I went to 3 of them, I couldn't get to the Brian Talbot one at Coventry, because I was still at school anyway, you know what I mean, doing my O-levels and all that. Yeah, well, probably first year in my A-levels. But the derbies were always the big one for us. Obviously, Leeds wasn't that far behind, you know what I mean, at that time.
Yeah.
But I used to love the derbies, and I grew up, you know, say before the derby game, we'd go out in the street, we'd have our Liverpool flags and scarves, my mates, they're Everton, we'd sing across the street in the morning, put them away, go and play footy in the field, and go and listen to it on the radio. I went like that right through. We'd go to cup finals together, you know, 84, 86, 89, Tranny Vans, whatever. Remember once we went to the Charity Shield. We got the midnight National Express coach down there, and didn't bother booking rooms. There's a big traffic island outside the grounds, one of these weeping willows. You saw kipped on the island, you know what I mean? And a big roundabout. And those were the days, you know what I mean? I mean, I love the derbies that much. 1984, when Liverpool and Everton looked at they could potentially be in the first final. I went to the 4 semis. So I went to Liverpool, Walter all over the way, which I would have done anyway. And I went, stood in the Gladys Street to watch Everton Villa, and then went to Villa Park. Stood on the Whitton Lane end, you know what I mean, watching them win one. Actually got beat 1-0 in the night, but went through. I mean, I still wanted Villa to win, but I thought just in case I want to be there, you know what I mean? See the 4 of them. There probably wasn't that many, apart from, I don't know, journalists and the like who would have done that, you know what I mean? But yeah, derbies have always been great. I mean, my Uncle Chris, but I was just looking at some of the stats. I mean, he actually played 549 games, scored 61 goals. And you try and put that into perspective. So I was looking at Phil Neal. He played 650 games, scored 59 goals, 27 of them ends. My Uncle Chris never took the penalties, free kicks. It was all like...
Alec Lindsay used to take the penalties, didn't he, back then when Chris Lawler was playing?
Alec Lindsay and Tommy Smith would take them as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Back then. But yeah, I've always loved the derbies, but yeah, it was just like...
Actually, Chris, somebody, a guy called Eddie Jones sent in a message, said he actually played with your uncle and against him when he played for St Teresa's School, and he played for Venice Street School as well against them. So I don't know how old Eddie is. So yeah,
I would imagine he's probably the similar age. I remember someone emailing me once saying, I haven't seen you, just thinking I was him, you know what I mean, on Facebook. But it's one of them. I mean, my dad went to St. Teresa, my Uncle Chris, well, all the family really, but my dad used to play amateur football himself, and what they do from St. Teresa, to get a minibus, and he'd all go to Wales, play at weekends, Portmaddock, Landroost, and he'd probably get similar to what you were getting at the professional side, you know what I mean? My dad would play left wing, and he, you know, when he'd come home from the pub in the week, after all that, he'd tell me all the stories, you know what I mean? And I remember him telling me one, he said, oh, this fella, I could see he was going to get me. This fella, Idris Evans or something he was called. So, and I seen him coming. He said, and I got him first. So the referee comes running over, said, I seen it all, sent him off on the stretcher. And after the match, he said, I was outside the ground waiting for the coach to go back on the minibus. And he said, the great T.G. Jones come up to me, Everton centre half, obviously before my time. He said, do you want to come and join us? And he said, don't play football like that, you know what I mean? But it was just the love of the game, all the amateur football. But my Uncle Chris as well, and the Shankly element as well, because he was actually doing more work on the ground and actually training before Shankly come. But my dad tells me the story. He was in the house one day, must have been early evening, there's a knock on the back door. So his mum went to the back door and Shankly pops his head in. And he says, just to tell you, your lad got a knock today, he said, but he's okay, he's going to be okay. And he said, his mum turned around and said, shouldn't he be going telling his wife first? That always tell the mum, you know what I mean? And that was Shankly all over, you know what I mean? I mean, when I ended up going to school, just after he retired, my school was just by where he lived. And the first year I was there, he'd often come through the playground with his mate and jog around the fields. He was all like this, gobsmacked, you know what I mean? It's Bill Shankly, you know what I mean? But back in the day, and it was great, and there was none of the animosity there is now. And I mean, I think social media is a lot to blame for it. You know what I mean? We can't blame Alan.
Have you got a question for Alan, Chris, before we move on to the Ben Nevis adventure?
You know what, Alan? Just tell me about Peter Jones. What a legend. You know, twist the lights off, I'd be there.
Well, Jonesy, I was lucky to work with, I didn't call him Peter then, he was Jonesy, always Peter. But I remember he'd been at Heysel, and I knew he'd been badly affected by Heysel.
Yeah.
And I was with him at Hillsborough. And you know something, it's probably a wild exaggeration, but I think the combination of those two events, albeit 4 years apart, they had a terrible impact on Peter. And he was never quite the same again, certainly after Hillsborough. I remember leaving the ground that day, and absurdly, I was going to cover the World Snooker Championship at the Crucible that Saturday evening. But I drove Peter to the railway station for him to catch the train to London. And we didn't say anything to each other because we were both in tears. And he got out of the car, got the train home, and I honestly don't believe he was ever the same again. The following season, no. He was just apart from the game.
Yeah.
And to this day, you know, these sort of absurd memories in my mind, even now, all these years on. I remember getting a phone call very late on a Saturday evening. I'd been commentating at Wolves. Jonesy had been doing the boat race that Saturday afternoon. And I remember I hadn't heard his voice for a while. And I contacted London and said, where's Peter? Oh, he's collapsed. We're hoping he's all right. But I got a phone call that Saturday evening. Again, I was down to go to the Crucible to do snooker the following week. And I was told by the editor, you can't. Jonesy has died. And we need you to do football full time. I know that sounds all warped, but that was how close my relationship was with Peter. He was a fantastic broadcaster, a wonderful scene setter. No one was better. And he also knew the importance of silence. You know, the right moment, he would pause the commentary and let the listener think about the moment. Brilliant man.
I was saying, I mean, the comments after Hillsborough, I think I post them every year. No, the sun's still shining.
By the way, one thing I want to say, don't forget that Gary McAllister goal at Goodison. That was also a great goal against Everton.
Yes.
And I was very fortunate.
Well.
I was commentating in that goal.
Is that the one where he moved the free kick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
was just.
If it gets any further away, took it from somewhere on Stanley Park. But
it was wonderful leaving Goodison after that moment. Walking through thousands of Everton fans to my car, thinking they're crying.
My niece, who's downstairs, I actually took her to that game, and we were coming out the ground, and I had a friend who was in the police force, and he was at the police station down at the bottom of Priory Road, and I says to him, my niece, just stay with me and don't speak. And anyway, this guy comes out the police station. He wasn't in uniform, and he got in his car and shouts, "Hey, John, weren't that great?" And I thought, that's what entered. And we were surrounded by about 20,000 very, very, very bitter blues. Yeah. And I thought, well, if I get done now, I'll blame the police. Yeah. So that was it. Yeah.
Chris, tell us about Ben Nevis then. Where did the idea for that come from?
Ben Nevis. So Mark Doyle, Kirby lad's been in the army 30 years. And I think his regiment was based up in Scotland. So when he left the services, he became a mountain guide. And I think it was one time he was walking around Glencoe with his mate, looked at Ben Nevis and said, because like me, he was at Hillsborough as well. He said, I want to get 96 people up that mountain. And obviously as it festered, and he was thinking, what should we do it for? And because we've known so many people who've got mental health issues, not entirely because of Hillsborough, it could be with him being in the army, do you know what I mean? He thought, I'll do this. So we got Ian on board to rally the troops. Ian sent the invites out, I seen it, and I thought, there's so many different reasons to want to do this. To remember the 96, to help people with mental health, and I just love walking. So that was it then. The ball was rolling. We all had to start getting ready. Because I'd done it before, but like probably 10, 15 years ago, even longer. And I knew what a struggle it was. So, you know, we're walking around the streets of Liverpool where the people who were joining us up in Scotland, they were like up and down the mountains, like walking out the door to like a Sound of Music scene, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm getting the train to town, and I mean, I've got the Chinese Arch, we've got the Blue Angel, you know, all the famous Liverpool sites. But we got there in the end, and we got a coach. We got on a coach the day before, and we actually stopped at Glenbuck and met
Shankly's hometown.
Yeah. She was there. She came to meet us, and it was great. You know, it was really, really nice. I think it's about 35 of us on the coach. And then we got to Fort William, probably around 7, half 7, something to eat, a couple of pints in bed. And then we were up in the morning, everyone in the red shirts, you know, that were specially designed. I think Mark must have felt really proud getting everyone there. I was made up for them, you know what I mean? I'm sure all the people who went were. So we got up, going up the mountain, and you know, you could see people falling by the wayside, and you half wanted to give them a piggyback and all this, but you know, you think you won't see them again. There's even one lad, Steve Smith, who you may see on the video. He was like Alan Azale with his guitar, one's a minstrel. You know, he's playing halfway up, he's playing at the top. But his poor wife Joe had to carry all his gear, you know what I mean? I think he gave her the credit for that as well, you know what I mean? And there was 2 lads from Scotland, Blair and Jack, with the bagpipe. They piped us off at the beginning, and then come the top they were playing. And I mean, I think the first one he started playing was Amazing Grace, and it was always my mum's favourite hymn because it was Shankly's, you know what I mean? And it was really emotional, hearing it in the snow, -10 degrees. It's just like phenomenal, you know what I mean? And
well,
the emotion.
I've got a slideshow to show you your progress up. There is a full video. Where can we see the full video, Chris? Because this is from the end of the video, the slideshow, but the full video is about half an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I sent it to you a couple of weeks ago.
If you put Ben Nevis 96 in YouTube in the search, I'm sure it'll come up. It'll come up. But here's the slideshow.
It's also on our website.
It's also on the Read All Over the Land website. Okay, John, great. Okay. Well, here's the slideshow, which kind of takes you through the journey to the top of Ben Nevis with 96 people. And Chris, do you have a final total now for how much money you raised? John did mention a figure earlier.
Yeah, well, just a little bit shy of £30,000. So what we're trying to do is I think the page closes in September. So we're trying to just nudge it over the 30 grand. I think going forward then it'll be annual walks, and there'll be events throughout the year as well.
So it's a Just Giving page, is it?
It's a Just Giving, a Virgin Giving page.
And what's the address? Do you know?
Again, I think it might be on your site. I think I
is it on the Red All Over the Land website?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a Virgin Giving page. Yeah, so I think it's there. Yeah.
Great. Oh, good stuff. Well, we've got a couple more comments. Torch Anfield says, "Cheers, lads, watching from Germany. I love to watch this bunch of die-hard Reds. Keep on the boss work." And Paul Morris says, "I've known Chris several years through work, and I'm so proud of him. Always a smile and thinking of others, top man."
No,
Fantastic.
Good stuff. All right. Well, that brings us, John, to the Wall of Shame. Do you want to just let us know how this all worked?
Yes. Well, what we did, you know, at the end of the season, you see this vote for the Player of the Year, you know, Goal of the Year, Pass of the Year, everything now, even the kickoff of the year, I think. And the Premier League have their Hall of Fame, I'm sorry. But I just thought, well, anyone can do that, but let's find out what the people who read our fanzine actually think. So we did the Wall of Shame. We had 4 categories. We could have gone on, but the space in the fanzine doesn't permit.
Right.
And we decided we wanted to find out who was the worst pundit, and we called this the Rat Boy Trophy. Now, for anybody who's not quite sure, Rat Boy is Gary Neville.
Yes.
As our good friend Dave Kirby mentioned in the last
episode.
Yeah. So we decided we haven't actually got a trophy, but if we had, that's what we'd have called it.
Yeah.
And so we did try to get Gary to sponsor it, but I don't think he responded. He was possibly out with his mate Martin. But we're not sure on that. So anyway, what we did was we asked people to vote, and amazingly, we had a tie. And Gary Neville never got one vote. Jamie Carragher got a vote, but not Gary Neville. And the people who would share the Rat Boy Trophy were Jermaine Jenas and the former Liverpool player Danny Murphy. Danny, I know, is on Match of the Day, and you talk about look for the mute switch. Yeah, I know what you mean there.
Well, congratulations to Jermaine and also to Danny for that, for the worst pundit in the Red All Over the Land Wall of Shame. Yeah.
It really meant something to them. But, so we've got the best commentator on the show tonight.
Of course.
So we want to know who was the worst.
Yes.
And
was this a tight run thing, John? I'm guessing not.
It was not really. But in fact, I think the guy who won it, I think his wife even voted for him. And that was Martin Tyler.
Right.
It was almost like a Russian election with the number of votes he got.
Right.
It was that far in front. And but you have to. Martin's a very, very clever guy. He can commentate on a game that's between anybody you like, but if he's got Gary Neville there, you can almost hear him making eyes at him. Manchester United must have done this, Gary. Yes, Martin, we did it in 1999. Ask Alan Greene. Things like this. But when the other thing about him is when Liverpool score a last-minute winner, you can almost hear the teardrops fall. He's so upset.
Yeah.
But
Alan, did your path ever cross with Martin Tyler?
Yes. Let's say we didn't get on that well.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it there.
That's a shock.
Yeah.
What I would say about Martin is, and this is why I hold him guilty above all the others, is that he's been around longer than all the others, and he should know better than do some of the things that he does. I would, there's a lot of criticism, for example, of Sam Matterface, who's become ITV's lead commentator. He's a nice guy. I want him to do well. Martin, no. He should learn to shut up. And if he can't shut up, let the producer tell him.
Yeah. Sadly, Martin couldn't be with us this evening to pick up his award.
No, he couldn't be with us, but his trophy is on his way. And for anybody who's of a certain age, they may remember the Coleman balls. Yes. David Coleman's balls, right. where David Coleman used to make a mistake, like in one, I believe it was an athletics competition. He said that's the fastest time anybody has ever run, but it's not the world record. So that was what he used to do. But anyway, unfortunately, we couldn't get 2 of the balls, so we've sent him 1.
Okay. All right, so he's got one of David Coleman's balls.
He's got one of David Coleman's balls, and it's gone on a nice trophy that we found in the field across the way.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And how many? Sorry, Alan, what were you going to say?
What David Coleman did?
No.
He would. There'd be a goal, and he'd go 1-0. You don't need to say any more.
Yeah.
You don't need to say. Yeah. That's, Smith, who scored with his left foot on a Tuesday night for the 5th time this season. Come on.
Yeah. I think there's a stats-demic, isn't there, with commentators who just have these nonsense stats. And I sit there in front of Julie and they come out with this, and I go, nonsense stat, ridiculous. Where does that all come from, Alan, this obsession with nonsense stats?
It's a joke. It is a complete joke. Now, I must say, it's partly due to laziness. I didn't do that much preparation for a game. I tried to make sure I knew who was playing and in which position they'd be playing.
Helped.
But I'd go to the game and describe what I saw. I won't name names, but a former colleague of mine was quoted in a newspaper saying he prepared for each commentary with 14 hours of preparation. Honestly, 14 hours of preparation. Well, what a sad life he leads.
But going back to Martin Tyler, last season, if he wanted to make friends with me, he was going the wrong way about it. And when we played the game against Chelsea, and Chelsea gave Liverpool the Guard of Honour because we'd already won the league, and he says maybe Liverpool should be giving Chelsea the Guard of Honour because they beat Manchester City, and that's why Liverpool became champions. And I thought, well, what about them 30 wins that we got before anybody else? But the thing is, I can't remember who else had beaten Manchester City. I think Norwich. But why didn't we give Norwich a Guard of Honour? The man's an idiot. But something like that.
Chris, do you believe that Martin Tyler deserves this title? Then are we all unanimous on this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then, John, what's the other category?
Should be a lifetime award.
A lifetime award, Alan.
I could say something there, but better not. No, Alan mentioned this earlier. Fake atmosphere.
Oh, now, so this is the category of the worst fake atmosphere.
The fake atmosphere, and we decided that this was going to be the Etihad Trophy, the Etihad Shield, because I've heard that Manchester City's ground when it's empty is not that different to when it's full. However, when you think back, I'm sure Alan can remember going to Highbury when they had the mural behind the goal, and the thought that actually made the atmosphere better and things like that. But it's fake atmosphere. That who the hell came up with it? I don't know. But it can't be of same mind and body. That's sure. But
it will have been a satellite producer who decided that this is one of the things he's missing from our television coverage. That it's so important to give the viewers what they want. Well, no, it's not. If you're committed to watching a football game, you're probably committed to one of the two teams. You experience the emotions of a missed opportunity or a calamitous own goal. You don't need screams in the background. It's nonsense. It should be done away with.
But they decided, the people who sent in the vote said the worst ground for fake atmosphere was Anfield, because you cannot replicate Anfield with this noise. And I can't remember again, but I was watching it actually on LFC TV, because I gave up on Sky a long time ago. And the Liverpool fans were singing "You'll Never Walk Alone" about 15 minutes into the game. Well, anybody who goes knows they sing it at the start, and they might sing it a minute from the end, or something like that. But the atmosphere was so fake and so false that when Liverpool were playing away at Old Trafford towards the end of the season, a vital game in the bid to finish third, and not once to hear any obscenities coming from the Old Trafford crowd. I mean, you know, if you're going to get it right, get it right. But no,
Yeah.
and there were no sign on or anything like that,
or even the worse ones, you know, the murderers ones and all the other, and even
none of
worse than
that.
that, which there's no point even dignifying with a comment about. But there was none of that, was there?
No,
Yeah.
there were no. No, I mean, it didn't matter. There was no comments about the referee's parentage. You know, I mean, some of the refereeing we saw, and the crowd, there was nothing. You know, and we games involving Leeds United, and Leeds United fans can make their thoughts known. But anyway, so yeah, Anfield it is, and I was pleased with that. Somebody said that. Whoever thought it up should be shot, but there again.
Right.
That was
Okay.
another comment.
Yeah.
But we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
are we up to the final category now, John, for the Wall of Shame
Yeah.
for the season?
Well, we wanted to know what people thought was the worst VAR decision last year, and we actually got somebody did say all of them, which was
Yes.
possibly fair enough, but it didn't come as a surprise, and the one with by the way, we called this the Howard Webb Dog's Bone Trophy, because Howard Webb being you know the man who possibly I wouldn't like. I mean, I don't know how many trophies he won with United, but he weren't far behind Gary Neville and co. But the worst VAR, and I know everyone's going to agree, was the game at Goodison and the assault, I can't call it anything else, by Pickford on Virgil van Dijk. It destroyed Virgil van Dijk's season completely. It also affected Liverpool's season totally as well, because there was not only that, there was the foul on by Richarlison on Thiago, and it took him out of the game for a couple of months. But that one, how the hell Pickford wasn't sent off, I don't know. But the thing is, I always thought that Michael Oliver was the best referee in the Premier Division for a long, long time. I think after that game, his stock fell so badly. I think it affected him. You know, I watched him in other games, and it seemed to affect him. And as for his pal in the van Stockley Park, David Coote, well, best not go into that too far, because I mean that man is an idiot, and you know he was watching that, he saw it. Forget about the Jordan Henderson goal if you can, because that was bad enough. That would have been worthy of winning it on its own. Although Sadio Mane's bootlace did look slightly offside, but you know how Jordan Pickford got away with that, I do not know.
What are your views on VAR, Alan?
I was in favour of it before it was introduced. And then the way it was interpreted has made me change my mind. It is robbing the game of so much emotion. A goal is scored now. And whether you're watching on television or whether you're in the stadium, you're pausing. You don't know if the goal is going to stand. You're waiting for the inevitable comment from the commentator, for example, on television. Oh, I think VAR will have a look at that. So it's just ruining things. And I'd rather have mistakes now, honest mistakes, by people like Michael Oliver, who I totally respect. I agree with you, John. I think he's the best that we have. And I do think that day has affected him. But give it back to the referees. And if they make an honest error, okay. Let's shout at them. Let's swear at them in real time, crowd noise. But don't resort to VAR. It's too much. And
Where are you on
mentioned
it, Chris? What do you
Hard
think?
Webb was in charge of the referees in MLS when I was there with Atlanta, and he was very, very important in getting VAR used in MLS.
And did they use it better there, Alan, than we've
Yes,
been?
they did.
And
They
what was
did.
the difference? What made the difference?
What we saw inevitably was a very quick reaction from the referee. He's got word in his ear,
Right.
and he immediately would go to a pitch side monitor. He didn't spend 5 minutes looking at the monitor, as some of our twits do, but he would look at it and he'd come away and he'd make the decision. But it didn't feel like forever. And I was commentating. So if it had gone on for too long, you can be sure I'd have moaned about it.
What about you, Chris? Where are you with VAR?
Absolutely, it takes the passion, emotion out the game. You don't know
Yes.
you don't know to cheer. It makes a mockery of it. Obviously, the goal line technology, spot on.
Yeah.
The offsides, if you're making the lines bigger, so you're getting, I don't know, 6-7 inches, whatever. I don't know. Jurgen Klopp suggested, didn't he, earlier in the season, make the lines thicker, so there's not these borderline decisions. It just spoils it. It's a shame. The players must feel it as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Every time they score, they're looking round and they're like this to each other. You think,
Well, why's no one kissing me? Oh, yeah, you know.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you know, we did this, but the thing is, we asked people to vote, and then what we did earlier, we decided we had to have a winner for a prize. So we've got this exciting prize.
So this
And
is all the people that voted?
Oh, yeah. We drew a name out of a hat,
Yeah.
or rather, Mary picked out a number, and I put it to the sheet. And the winner is Greg Henderson, and yeah, he'll be in tears when he hears what he's won, because it's a signed photo, colour photo of a Liverpool manager.
Wow, what can go wrong there, John?
No, nothing. It was Roy Hodgson, by the way. So that's who we've got here, and that prize will be on his way when as soon as we can. And more so, it's when Roy was managing Liverpool, because he's got his Liverpool tie on, his Liverpool coat on. So we, as you now know, on Red All Over YouTube, we don't mess about. We go for the big stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I can't tell you what the second prize was.
It was probably one of the empty seats that he brought to the ground for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right.
But it was all good fun. And it's all
fun.
in the next issue of Red All Over the Land.
Yeah, if you missed any of that, if you've tuned in late and you want to see the winners of all the categories and the ones we maybe mentioned earlier, then they're all in the latest issue of Red All Over the Land, which is coming out soon. If you subscribe, it'll be in your post box soon. And the next match you go to, even if they're the pre-season friendlies, John and the team will be selling the fanzines there. We've got some comments. This is one for you, Chris. This comes from Big Ben. He says, "Well done to Chris and all the climbers. Will certainly make a contribution to get you over the 30 grand. Great show, guys. Thanks very much." Ian Golder has been in touch again. Very emotional watching that. He's talking about the slideshow of your climb up Ben Nevis. You can watch the whole video. It's not that long. It's only about half an hour, but I didn't have time to put the whole thing on. I just thought the slideshow at the end there, we actually get to the summit. But it's a video. You know, there's a guy up there playing the bagpipes. There's a guy playing the guitar. It's a great little video, and that's there at Red All Over the Land on the website. The website address, John, it's redallovertheland.co.uk.
No, www.redallovertheland.com.
.com. Okay, it's .com. redallovertheland.com. I was so close. Okay, so now it's time for questions for Alan Greene. Have you got another one for him, Chris, before John launches into the ones that Red All Over the Land leaders have got, or do you want to move straight into John? It's up to you.
The only thing I was going to ask, apart from football, what's the favourite sport you've commentated on?
I didn't quite catch that, sorry.
I was saying, apart from football, which other sport did you like commentating on?
Well, it's funny, during the ongoing Tokyo Olympics, which I'm not watching, but I did 5 Olympic Games, and I was talked into doing rowing by the then head of sport. And he asked me, before he told me what he had in his mind, "What do you know about rowing, Alan?" And I said, "Well, what do you think I know about rowing, Bob?" "Nothing." And he said, "Well, do you know anybody involved?" And I said, "Well, I've heard of Steve Redgrave, and I think he rows with a guy called Matthew Pinsent." He said, "That's right." I said, "Well, that's all I know about rowing." He said, "Well, I'd like you to do rowing at the Olympics in Atlanta." This was in 1996. And I said, "Well, goodness gracious." I mean, I turned down boxing in the mid-'80s because I couldn't stand the sport. I didn't know enough about rowing. I thought, "You're going to have to let me think about this." And I went to see the two guys, and they were wonderful, absolutely wonderful with me. And they actually talked me into going to Atlanta to commentate in their sport. And I put everything I had into it. And do you know, Great Britain won 1 gold medal at the Atlanta Olympic Games. It was Redgrave and Pinsent in the pair, in the rowing. And I cried that afternoon after I finished the commentary. And I ran down to where the boat was, just by the dock, so that I could interview them as well. Did the interview. And then as I was running off with my tape recorder, Steve shouted after me. He said, "Alan." I said, "What, Steve?" He said, "Glad you came." Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. And you know something, the Olympic Games that followed up until the one at London, the rowers won countless medals. And I was so happy to be a small part of that, describing it. It was a great sport. Good people, honest people, fabulous. And golf. I did
And
Ryder
golf.
Cups and Open
Ryder
Championships.
Cup. Yeah.
Not bad.
Okay, then, John, what have we had from Read All Over the Land readers?
We've
Questions
had,
for Alan Greene.
We've had a question from Kevin Neely, who lives in Donegal, and he wants to know if Alan kept a record of how many games he's covered.
Oh, no. No, I didn't. But I did once, a few years ago, count up the number of cup finals that I'd done. And at that stage, this must be 5 or 6 years ago, I'd done over 100 cup finals. That's FA Cup, League Cup, World Cup, European Cup, Fairs Cup, European Championship. It was over 100 finals.
That's
So,
not
I mean,
bad.
it's ridiculous.
But also living in Donegal is David Moen, who was on our very first show, and he wants to know if you remember doing a commentary from a bus. He thought it was
Yes.
video versus Man U.
Yeah, it was in Moscow, and it was with Jimmy Armfield, and I can't remember. I think they were playing CSKA Moscow United, and I remember getting to the ground a bit late on the media bus with Jimmy Armfield, and the producer was already there, and we had seen the commentary position the previous night, and the producer, Peter Slater, was waiting for us as we came into the ground. And I said, "Sorry, we're late, Peter. Sorry, we're late." He said, "No time to tell you." He said, "Just follow me." And he went down to the track surrounding the pitch. And I thought, where's he going? Where's he going? And Jimmy and I followed him. And we went to one corner of the pitch. And there were 2 single buses. And Alan Parry was in one. He was the television commentator for the game. And Jimmy and I were in the other. And it was so absurd. And the truth is, it was a wet night as well. So the inside of the bus was all steamed up. So we opened this sort of slot at the top, and it was just wide enough for me to get my head through. And Jimmy did the same. And we commentated from that open slot on the single-decker bus. And most of the action, of course, was at the far end of the ground, just the way the game went. and it went to penalties, and that we had to describe that.
And the
But it's
penalties were at the
ridiculous.
far end as well?
Yet at the far end of the ground. I couldn't even influence the referee to get it to this end. I remember it so well. Jimmy was brilliant. Lovely man.
And Graham, didn't you have to watch a game from a bus at Bournemouth once?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I worked for 2CR FM. I wasn't involved in the sports side of things, but yeah, Bournemouth used to before they had that end fixed up. When Dean Court got done up, they only did 3 sides, and at the bare end, they used to roll a double-decker bus up, and you'd watch it from a double-decker bus. But I didn't have to commentate on it with all the action at the other end. Goodness me!
I remember you telling me about it.
Yeah.
They think it's a glamorous profession,
But another question is from Steve Hales, who's one of our fanzine sellers. Is what's your opinion on the media making sure they have diverse pundits and commentators rather than pick the best people?
Yes. That I referred to that earlier.
Yeah.
About box ticking,
Yeah.
which is, quote, the supreme influence today. To me, it should be about one thing: ability. Are you able to do the job at the required level for the audience that you have? No. Gender comes into it. Race comes into it. Youth comes into it. And they're all things I think that should be encouraged, but not at the expense of ability. And, Clive Tilsley was pushed to one side by ITV. And Sam Matterface, who replaced him, is much younger. And probably the head of ITV Sport feels more comfortable working with Sam, who owes a lot to him now, than he does to Clive, who has immense experience. But that didn't make the decision right. It was a poor decision. It happens now. Happens. Look at the television coverage. Look at the people who are fronting it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the match of the day audience. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I think the way it's gone now, it's more about the sensationalism. I stopped watching it, but when I used to watch the show on a Saturday afternoon on Sky before a couple of years ago,
Jeff Stelling.
And it was almost hysterical, shouting, screaming. And he was trying to put words in people's mouth, and I thought I found that awful. Yeah.
Well, look, I've known Jeff for many years, and he is a very good broadcaster, but yeah, he was leading his fellow broadcasters down certain areas, and I didn't think it was great, but it was a very popular show. But that's another example of how box ticking took over. The pundits in the studio were all experienced footballers.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're dumped.
Yeah, it was Phil Thompson and Letizier, and they were,
And you're thinking, how did he get there? How did she get there? And it's wrong. I'm not saying the people that have come in can't do it, but they're learning on air. And that should be happening on regional television, not national television.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question from Julian Hill, who lives in Germany, and he actually mentions, Chris, that your uncle was scoring 1 goal every 10 games 50 years ago, and he wonders what he'd think how they go on now about Robbo and Trent. But he was doing this 50 years ago, so that was some achievement, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, yeah, the figures speak for themselves. I mean, I think, someone will correct me, he scored as many European goals as Kenny. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yes. But he actually scored another in the derby, didn't he? A couple of years later, and I think it was maybe the last derby he played in. I think
Yeah,
that was one of his goals. Yeah,
he actually
but
scored his last goal on my 11th birthday against Red Star Belgrade. Probably one of his better goals. He volleyed it in from the edge of the box Anfield Road, and he scored in both legs. We lost the 2-1. That's the last goal he scored.
Yeah.
well, Julian also wants to know from Alan, given the changes in technology, does he think that sports commentary on the radio is becoming a lost art?
Shamefully, I don't listen anymore. I've switched
Right.
off. I mean, it would be unfair on me to judge, for example, what's going on in Five Live at the moment. My wife listens to Five Live, and she tells me things, but it doesn't encourage me to go listening. And I'd probably be bitter in my reaction. So I prefer to avoid the bitterness. I shouldn't be like that. Look, 45 years in the BBC, most of them in BBC Sport. I've been so fortunate in all the things that I've been allowed to do without, as I said to you right at the start, without ever intending being a commentator. It is absurd, isn't it? You know, I didn't want to do this, but I did it. And I got to see some fantastic occasion, whether overwhelmingly in football, but also in rowing, also in golf. I'm a very lucky individual, but I don't feel right. I think it would be unfair to pass comment on, quote, my successors.
Well, there's another guy that sent us a question. You may actually know this person. His name's Bernard O'Byrne, who was I think he was the president of the Irish FA when Jackie Charlton was the manager over there. And well, you've answered this. Do you agree the standard punditry on Sky and BBC is abysmal? And he also mentions that what one case of somebody who cannot stray from the line is Graham Souness, but when he's on Irish television, it's totally different. He can tell the truth.
That's very interesting. I rate Suey as a pundit generally. Of course, I've loved him as a player. I got to know him personally as well. I'm not in a position to judge whether he's different on Irish television. I think it's down to the producers and the editors in terms of how much flexibility they give to their broadcasters and how much pressure they put on their broadcasters if they don't like what they're doing. I think, if you look at relationship between, say, Suey and Roy Keane, and when they're working together, well, the animosity. Take knives out of the studio, folks. But it's part of the attraction to certain broadcasters if you get that kind of feeling. I think honestly that Suey lends himself to the right side of honesty when he's doing that job. Honestly believe that.
I'd like to see it with the pundits. I've noticed they don't often have people from both sides. Like if it's an international game, they very rarely have someone who is from that nation. Or if it's a European game, they don't have someone who knows about Juventus. Or they don't. It's not often that happens. You get Gary Lineker and you get a couple of the usual stooges, and you think, well, I'd like to hear from someone who can give us a bit of background about this club and this team, because we want to know, what's good. They don't seem to have that side of it for me, and I'd like to see that. And talk about their fans and because there's so many clubs with great fans. Like, when I went to the Dortmund game at Anfield a few years back and was on the bus with the Dortmund fans, they were fascinating. They were like Liverpool fans with their encyclopedic knowledge of different football games. I'd like to hear somebody like that who knows that side of it. Why do you think they stick to the same old suspects, Alan? Is it just easier?
Because the view of the producer stroke editor is narrow. He assumes that the people watching coverage of this game let's say it's Manchester United against Borussia Dortmund. They're only interested from the Manchester United perspective.
Well, if I was watching Manchester United and Borussia Dortmund, I would want a pundit from Borussia Dortmund, without a doubt.
Know what you're saying.
Get Jurgen on.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be perfect. No, he would be, though, John. You know what I mean? But they don't seem to do that.
No, they don't. But again, that's why I lean towards criticising the editors and the producers rather than the broadcasters themselves. I mean, at the time of, I know we're not going to cover it, but at the time of the Super League, Gary Neville was very, very forthright in what he said. And he was basically, from what I could see, allowed to say whatever he thought.
Well, it was borderline incitement, what he was saying.
Editor, I would have reined him in a little bit.
Yeah.
I definitely would have reined him in a little bit, because by being so forthright, he went too far on occasion.
He did.
And, you've got to get the balance right. And so, in a way, that's why on reflection, as I got older, my bosses found it more difficult to cope with me, because I didn't owe them as much as I owed earlier bosses who perhaps I had more respect for. And get rid of him. Let's bring others in. The way it was.
John?
Sorry, go on.
John, what have you got? What else have you got?
Right, another one of our regular contributors to Read All Over the Land, and also has bought the fanzine for years, Robin Clegg. He remembers the Chelsea-Bayern shootout, and he believes you said, "Come on, Didier," as Drogba stepped up to take the penalty kick. Do you remember that?
No. I don't. What was I meant to have said?
He said when Didier Drogba went up to take his penalty kick in the shootout, you said, "Come on, Didier."
I can't remember precisely, but I was very certain that listeners would know I wanted him to score. It was in the inflection in the voice and, "Come on, Didier." Yeah. Look, I was watching an English team in a Champions League final. I want that English team to win. Even in 1999, in the Nou Camp, Munich. My final words, I think, in that game were, "Munich doesn't know what's happened to them. I'll tell them Manchester's happened to them." Something along that line. No. And then I went and threw up in the corner.
Well, the final one has come from the Florrie, and this is from Lawrence Fenlon, who's the media manager at the Florrie, and he's helping us run the show on the 13th of November. And you've already said where you may be, Alan, but he says, "What are you doing on Saturday, 13th of November? He'd love you to be at the show."
Well, I've said to you, John, that if I'm in this country, I will be there. But my wife and I have an affiliation to San Diego in California. And we haven't been able to go there since January of last year. We have relations there. And it's become a real driving force. We're desperate to get back there, particularly with me not working now and not being restricted by the football season or whatever. As soon as travel restrictions allow, we are going to head to San Diego. But it appears I'm going to have to write to Joe Biden directly, appeal to his sense of decency, and allow this particular Greene family to join his wonderful city of San Diego. Do you think he'll be listening to me?
He's probably watching.
We'll get a copy of it to him. Yeah. Well, Murray wants to go to St. Louis to see her sister, so we'll have to do a double up on that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being so great on episode 3 of Red All Over YouTube. If you've tuned in late to this, as soon as this finishes, there'll be a recording of the whole thing at this exact same link on YouTube, and you can watch it on demand. In the meantime, you'll get everything you need to know in Red All Over the Land. I know this isn't the latest issue because John's got the latest issue there, and which will be out soon. So there you go. Move it to your left, John.
I'll put it in front of me.
There you go. That's the latest issue. If you subscribe, it'll come through your door soon. The next game you can catch it at will be one of the friendlies. You can also check redallovertheland.com. That is the address if you want to see there's all sorts on there, including the full video of Chris and the team of 96 going up Ben Nevis. Chris Lawler, thank you very much for coming on and for telling us all about what was going on. Hopefully you're going to the Florrie on November the 13th. Will I meet you in person there?
We'll invite you.
Yeah,
we'll invite you, Chris. You'll be on our table.
Be great to see you. If you're not in San Diego, Alan, I'll see you at the Florrie as well on the 13th of November. Thank you so much for coming on as our superstar guest. It's just been great. And great articles in Red All Over the Land as well. Just great, hard-hitting honesty from a man who is just as forthright in Red All Over the Land as he always was on the radio. It's great to read your articles. They are superb. And John Pearman, 26 years of Red All Over the Land, the longest Liverpool fanzine, the only surviving Liverpool fanzine. We'll see you at the match, will we?
And well, it doesn't show, does it, in my appearance now that how long I've been doing it? Yeah, no, I won't be able to make the first pre-season friendly, but I'll be there at the rest. But can I just say thanks to Alan? I know he's a busy man, and thanks to Chris. I know you're a busy man, and giving up your time for us tonight, it's a pleasure. It really is, and thank you very much.
It's been so much fun.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll let you know, or John will let you know through the fanzine when the next Red All Over YouTube is. Thanks a lot, and of course, remember, you'll never walk alone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
See you later.